Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website's educateforlife.org. And I'm really looking forward to the show today. We have a great show coming up. If you were listening last week, I actually had Walt Brown on my program, and he is an engineer, a former engineer, all kinds of credentials, a professor and so forth. Walt Brown was, and he is living in Arizona. He's the one that wrote the book In the Beginning, and he has all this scientific evidence and support for the flood from geology. And this week, I have a guest on my show, Bill Ludlow, also from Arizona. And before I bring him on, and you can see us here on the screen if you're streaming live. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He studied at Lansing Community College. This is from Bill's website. Michigan State University, and he's also been an avid amateur geologist, paleontologist, and fossil collector for many years. He's the owner of his own entertainment company, Dirty Goat Productions. You can check that out at dirtygoat.com. And he spends much of his time in Arizona studying the landscape, searching for fossils, and fishing. Very good. He is a member of the Geological Society of America, Southwest Paleontological Society, and the National Center for Science Education. He currently volunteers at the Arizona Museum of Natural History, where he teaches human origins. His discoveries of 270 million-year-old mammal-like reptile tracks in Arizona on the, I don't know how you pronounce that, Mongolian. Is that right, Bill?
Mogollon.
Okay, rim were presented at the Regional Geological Society of American Convention in Flagstaff, Arizona in 2018. And he's been awarded a 5-year permit by the federal government to continue studying and collecting data in that region. And just a disclaimer, Bill is an atheist, and I love having different people from different perspectives on my program. I've had Lawrence Krauss, also who teaches at the University of Arizona. I've had Dan Barker. I've had Michael Shermer, and a variety of other atheists or Buddhists or Muslims on my program. And I love to hear different people's perspectives. I am specifically a young earth creationist. I believe that scripture and science supports that more than it does any other particular perspective. And obviously Bill disagrees with me, but I want to hear what he has to say. And I find I learn a lot when I listen to what other people think and their experiences and the evidence they present. So looking forward to this. Bill, thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me. Can I tell how I found you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of an online course junkie. I take a lot of these free online courses and that, and I get weekly emails from, I believe it was classcentral.com. Clicked on the link, and I was looking at the courses on evolution.
Sure.
And there was an ad actually for one of your classes on there.
I don't put those ads up, by the way. That's Udemy puts those up, not me.
Okay, yeah. So I saw an ad for one of your courses. I clicked on it, I went to your website and checked it out, and was able to look at some of your preview videos and things like that. And so, I just thought I would contact you and see if, based on the fact you had the radio show and everything, if you might want to have a discussion on that. So.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And Bill told me that he has debated Kent Hovind last year. So I think that's incredible too. If you don't know who Kent Hovind is, he's been teaching creation on the creation evolution subject forever. He's slightly infamous now after having rebelled against the U.S. government and then ending up in prison for a little while. But regardless, I think that's pretty cool that you debated him. And so what I'm curious to know, Bill, is first of all, how did you get started down this road? When did you decide that you were an atheist? Did you grow up? What kind of family did you grow up? Background did you grow up in? And then what was that process like where you finally came to the conclusion, I think the evidence supports atheism and so forth?
I was baptized Lutheran. I was actually confirmed Episcopalian. We lost all the audio at that point and had to restart the Google Hangout, but here's the rest.
Okay, sorry for that. We had a quick technical difficulty there, but Bill, you were saying in college there was a guy that your roommate had a friend who was really big into the young Earth creationism.
Oh, the friend's roommate, yeah. He was a real big into young Earth creationism. I guess I just didn't realize before that people like that existed, that actually believed the world was 6,000 years old. The church that I went to growing up as a child didn't teach that, so never had been really exposed to it. And then with the internet in the 90s, I found out about Kent Hovind and joined some of these message boards, forums, and things where they discuss this type of thing. And it just was real interesting to me that
Yeah,
trying to find out why people believe the way they did here. So.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm, I lean young Earth creationist. That's my perspective, and for me, I'm very evidence based. So to me, I look at the evidence and I go, this is by far the most compelling argument, and I'm relatively familiar with the science that pertains to the issues. I mean, there's tons to learn out there, so I'm always open to new information. But like I said, I've interviewed people like Lawrence Krauss. I've interviewed a lot of the skeptics out there, and so I've listened to the debates. So, what for you is the most? I don't know. What is the most compelling evidence for you that the universe or the Earth is millions, billions of years old?
Well, the scientific dating methods that are used, that we
Radioisotope dating
use,
and so forth.
radiometric dating, yeah. I mean, as far as you know, how we determine a minimum and maximum age of the Earth. I mean, you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that
Sure.
um, basically, in the way Bishop Usher um, described it was through or researched it, determined the age of the Earth was through genealogies in the Bible.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I believe the Bible um, has been around just a fraction of a second in geological time,
Sure.
and that it can't be used as a science book.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so,
so here, let me
can
ask
I?
you. Go ahead.
Mhm. How? Let me ask you real
Sure.
quick though. How? I mean, what is your understanding on how we date the Earth? How do you believe that scientists date the Earth?
Well, I know that generally speaking, there's a lot of different ways that people will go about dating either the Earth or the universe or whatever it might be. So everything has to be dated differently. So, for example, you have to use carbon 14 dating on things that were living, but you can't use carbon dating on something that's not alive, like a rock. So you might use uh, potassium argon dating or whatever. You're going to use different radioisotopes based on what it is you're trying to measure. And depending on how far back you want to go affects also. So carbon 14 dating is only accurate supposedly to about 200,000 years. So you've got to switch to another radioisotope in order to get back to, if you want to go older than that, you can't use carbon dating. So, and then there's, of course, there's the issues of people are looking at rates of particular things. So one of the newer ways of trying to evaluate the age of the Earth or the age of living things is based on what's happening within genetics. So the mutation accumulation rate within genetics. It's one of the newer methods of trying to date things. So I know there's a lot of different ways of trying to date things, but what I've found a lot of times is that certain assumptions or assertions are just taken for granted without a lot of digging into exactly how they came up with that. And it ends up being circular. A lot of it ends up being circular because they're assuming the ages are old before they've come to that conclusion with the evidence, and so they use the evidence to justify the method, and the method to justify the evidence. But and so far I haven't heard something that's ultra compelling as far as the age of the Earth is concerned. I haven't heard a lot that is very compelling to me. But you know what? We're coming up on a quick break, Bill, and I'll let you respond
Okay.
to what I just said here. Bill Ludlow is on the air with me here today, and he is a atheist as well as obviously, if he's an atheist, typically old Earth geology. I am a young Earth. I take the young Earth position. So we're having a great discussion about that. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening today. This is Kevin Conover. I'm your host on Educate for Life. We're on the radio down here in San Diego, Southern California. K-Praise 1210 AM. We're also on North County, FM 106.1. And then we're streaming all over the place. I've got all kinds of YouTube, Facebook, Periscope. And then Bill, my guest today, is also putting this up on his channel. If you're interested, I love this kind of discussion. It's very interesting to me. And I love talking to different people who are experts on these different issues. So Bill has a lot of experience in paleontology and geology. And Bill, I wanted to give you the opportunity to explain to me how things are actually dated here. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Yeah. My website too, by the way, I haven't mentioned, is creationsciencefiction.com. So, and I offered a challenge a couple of years ago. You've heard of Ian Juby, probably.
Say it again.
He dedicated Ian Juby.
Okay.
Have you heard of him?
I haven't.
Yeah, the young Earth creationist out of Canada. that no scientific dating method used to date the age of Earth, or no scientific dating method at all, actually, has ever given us a age of 6 or even 6 to 10,000 years. So I want to explain how we do actually date the Earth. Cosmos episode 7, that's a great series. If you haven't seen that, they talk about this a lot in there. But Claire Patterson was a geochemist who was the first to give us a pretty accurate estimation of the Earth's age after determining the age of a meteorite. But we can only really determine a maximum age from that. So the way we date the age of the Earth today is twofold. We measure the minimum age of the Earth by calculating the amount of radioactive decay in zircon crystals. So zircon crystals are very tough. We use uranium lead dating on these. While rock or sediment around the crystals may have eroded a long time ago, the crystals remain intact. So we can find them almost in like second generation sedimentary rock. So zirconium and uranium are very similar. So during the formation of these crystals, some uranium manages to bond with the zirconium and get trapped inside. Uranium decays very slowly into lead, which is a lot different from zirconium, and therefore it wouldn't have bonded in the first place. So we know it wasn't present in the original crystal. So the more lead you find in a zircon crystal, the older it is. Using the radioactive decay law and the known half-life of uranium, we can then determine the minimum age of the Earth. So currently, the oldest known zircon crystals are about 4.4 billion years old, which gives us a minimum age. So determining the maximum age of the Earth is done by dating meteorites, since they would have formed about the same time as the Earth back when our solar system formed. So samples from the Canyon Diablo meteorite, which is right here, crashed in Arizona 50,000 years ago, left a big crater east of Flagstaff, show an age of about 4.53 to 4.58 billion years. So,
okay, so
again,
let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that using radioisotope dating and
right.
using, what was it, uranium you said?
This is using uranium lead dating is called.
Okay,
yeah.
so
uranium changes to lead.
Okay, so uranium is the unstable isotope, the parent isotope, and
Correct.
then the lead is the daughter isotope. And do you know the half-life of uranium to lead? What it is?
It's over a billion years. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to interject here, but you can. I don't want to stop your thought process there. Did you want to finish what you were saying?
Well, all I would have to say is, most of the creationist arguments I see against this, they just use the word assumptions a lot. They use the word assumptions over and over and over, like assumptions are a bad thing. I mean,
Sure.
and we are using what's called. They know the half-life, and we've measured it. Sure, so we've only measured some of these things for maybe 100 years, but we use what's called the radioactive decay law, and every nuclear power plant, every nuclear everything that we have relies on that law. It is a scientific law. It is not, and it is mathematically calculated, and it just holds true for all those different isotopes.
Yeah.
Some things like carbon-14 can be affected by the environment, and other things that can be subject to contamination. But things like a zircon crystal, I mean, these things are sealed. We can tell if they become contaminated. So we aren't making assumptions on contamination. We aren't making assumptions on the radioactive decay rate.
So I'm very interested
using a scientific law.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you're saying, because this to me is a real kind of crux point, what you're making. It's a linchpin issue. Because I've interviewed Dr. John Baumgartner. He's a geophysicist, and he's done studies on this. And what they've found is, because this is a counterpoint to what you're saying. I'd like to really get to the truth of this. In diamonds, which are considered, like zircon, are very, very hard. They're almost impossible to contaminate simply because they are so hard. And typically, geologists assume that diamonds were formed at the very lowest strata in Earth, so over 500 million years old. And so when you get a diamond, you don't, because diamonds are formed from coal, right? And coal is formed from plant matter, and plant matter has C14 in it. So the plant matter turns to coal. The coal has C14 in it, which is a radioisotope, and then it turns into diamonds. Now, the diamonds are supposedly formed millions and millions of years ago. And so what you would expect is that because C14's half-life means that it can only last for 200,000 years, you would expect that there would be no C14 in diamonds. But what they found is tons of C14 inside diamonds. So the question becomes, how is it possible if C14 only lasts 200,000 years before it changes into N14, how can you still have C14 in diamonds, which cannot be contaminated and are supposedly formed in the bottom layers of the earth? And so for me, that again there is, okay, one of us is missing a puzzle piece. Something is wrong here. Because I'll give you another example of this same thing. So the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, actually took coal seams, and they had them laid out all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. And again, coal has C14 from plants, right? Well, what you would expect is that if these layers were laid down over millions or billions of years, you would expect that as you go down into the earth, on the very bottom layers, the coal seams at the bottom would have no C14 because they were formed first and they're the oldest. And as you move up, you would see a steady increase in the amount of C14 in the coal seams until you got to the top where you would have the most C14 still left. But what they actually found in the coal seam layers is a similar amount of C14 all the way from the top to the bottom. And so again, what that speaks to is evidence that all these layers were actually laid down very, very quickly over a short amount of time rather than very slowly over a long amount of time. And so I'm hearing these different evidences back and forth, and for me, that's why I tend, along with other facts, I tend to lean towards young Earth creation, because that would be explained well. If there was a worldwide flood where all those layers were laid down all at the same time, then that would, from a predictability perspective, that's what young Earth creation theory would postulate, and then that is what you see in the actual coal seams. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah. The only problem is diamonds are not actually formed from coal. Diamonds and coal are both forms of carbon, but diamonds are not formed from coal. In fact, most of the diamonds on Earth are way older than any coal deposits.
But that just proves the
reason.
Point. You see what I'm saying?
Well, no, because diamonds form naturally deep in the earth out of carbon, but they're not formed from coal. And you couldn't carbon date a diamond because it was never anything that was alive and in equilibrium.
There should be no C14 in it, right? If it's millions of years old, there should be no C14 in the diamond.
Not necessarily, because radioactivity can modify the carbon in the diamond, and it can create what we would measure as C14 in a lab, but it was never created in the environment. It's created right there in the diamond. So,
but regardless, because C14 can only last about 200,000 years before it decays into N14, because diamonds are found, as far as I understand it, on the lower levels, the bottom of those strata, we would expect that there would be no C14 in them, and yet it's there, which means that if diamonds are formed at the beginning of Earth, right, then we would expect there would be no C14, which means it couldn't have been millions or billions of years ago.
But the formation of C14 in diamonds from contamination or from radioactivity could have been way more recent.
Okay,
so
and
there's always an
that's what I would say.
For that.
So for me, that would be an assertion.
Coal,
then.
Yeah, coal is something that's modified. Again, when we do carbon-14 dating, things cannot be contaminated, they cannot be modified. You don't carbon date fossils in like metamorphic rock that have been changed by heat and pressure and everything else like that. We know that doesn't work. It's also why we don't test coal with the carbon-14 dating method. I mean, we would date coal layers by using both absolute and relative dating methods based on the layer that they're in. We wouldn't date the coal later by carbon dating it at all. It would be silly. So.
My guest today is Bill Ludlow, and he is living in Arizona. He's an amateur paleontologist and geologist, and he's very, very much. I don't want to use the word amateur as somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about, because he's been doing this for a long time, and he does know what he's talking about. So stay with us. We're having a great discussion about the age of the Earth. And Bill Ludlow, you can check him out on his website too, which is creationsciencefiction.org.
.com.
I take offense to that. I take offense to that website name. Okay, .com. No, I'm just kidding. I take no offense. Thanks for listening today. This is Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. And if you're watching online, I hope you're enjoying the program so far. And if you have comments or stuff you want to shoot my way or you want to shoot Bill's way, please do so. I love to engage in this sort of discussion. I'm actually having a discussion on the age of the Earth on my Facebook page right before this show today. And I find it very interesting. A lot of people with different perspectives. So I think we can all take a little bit of humility and learn from one another. And I'm listening to Bill here and listen to what he has to say. So, Bill, you said you wanted me to give you my best argument for the age of the Earth. Okay, so particularly for me, and I'm sure this is the way it is for you too, is that my viewpoint isn't established on one main point. It's a variety of data points that I feel all together make a case that the Earth is young, and my particular view is about 6,000 years old. So, I guess I'll just pull out a variety of different data points and just say these are some of the things that do it for me. And one of the big ones is the Bible itself, because the Bible, I believe, although it's a religious book, it started out as a history book. And so I believe that the people that wrote it were actually writing down real history. And the reason I think that is because if you look at a lot of the stories in the Bible, they're actually verified by archaeology. About a month or so ago, I just met the guy that discovered Jericho, and he's doing all this archaeological dig on Jericho now. They found, Hezekiah's tunnel. They found so much stuff. I just talked to another guy who he's doing all this work on Egypt, and they've now found in 15 different tombs a recording of Moses and the Red Sea event. They have 15 different Egyptian tombs that have this out on the walls. So when I look at all this historical stuff and it's validated, and then as I continue to look at it, to me it makes a lot of sense that the history recorded in the Bible is an actual real history. That's one of the points. Another point would be that it's interesting to me that according to evolutionists, we've been here for 200,000 years as human beings, but we have no writings, no consistent calendars, writing systems, historical records that go back past 6,000 years. So it's interesting that we would be human for 195,000 years, 194,000 years, and then all of a sudden we start writing. Why were we as smart as we are today, but we didn't start writing for 194,000 years? To me, I look at that, and that to me is good evidence that we've only been here for around 6,000 years. One of my favorite ones, and I'll stop with this one and let you respond. I had a really interesting discussion with Dr. John Sanford. He's a Cornell University professor. He was there for 30 years. He has 30 different genetic patents. Very, very smart guy. And he basically looked at the genetic decay rate in humans, and what he found was that based on the rate at which mutations, the genome is decaying, basically they're point mutations, it's 100 to 300 per generation. We actually couldn't go back too far because if we had been here as long as evolutionists say, we would have already gone extinct because of the decay of the genetic genome. So population geneticists, there's this guy named Kondrashov. He's a really famous population geneticist. He's not a Christian, not a young earth creationist, but he has this statement: why are we still alive? Based on the current genetic decay rate, we shouldn't even exist anymore because we are accumulating genetic problems too quickly. So when I put all this stuff together, pieced it together, along with quite a few other data points, I feel like the young earth position is the most credible position, both scientifically and historically.
Okay. The argument, though, that there are things in the Bible or things in Genesis, the Old Testament, that are real, could also be used to support any Abrahamic religion. I mean, the Muslims could say the exact same thing, and so could the Jews. So, there's a term in English writing, and I can't remember what it is, where some fiction or when you're trying to make a fiction type book seem more real, they use real places and events. Now, I do think that there is some historical truths to the Bible. There's definitely are. I think that a lot of the interpretations of that, though, as far as the disasters and things like that attributed to God, were just because of basic lack of understanding, of what maybe the stories that were told down about this, that were embellished and made to kind of fit the religion. So I do believe again that there are truths in the Bible as far as historical truths, but I think that the entire Genesis 1, all that type of thing is more allegorical. You can get some good things out of it, but it's not meant to be fact.
Well,
So
I'll give you another example. So, for example, there's something called the Sumerian King List, and it's completely extra biblical. It's nothing to do with the Bible. They found 15 copies of this in different locations through archaeology, and each one mentions places that are listed in the Bible and mentions people listed in the Bible. So what it's doing is it's an extra biblical reference. It's an additional testimony confirming that these people were real and the places were real. And you can look at that. I'll give you another example. There are over 400 flood stories now that have been found all over the earth that are specifically talking about a worldwide flood where a family was saved and animals were rescued and there was a judgment. So the question becomes, how do you get 400 flood stories from all over the earth, right, that all have a very similar story? There are differences, but tons of very, very similar parallels, all talking about the same event. And I just don't see how, after looking at these different evidences, that we can just brush it off and say, no, everybody just talks about floods. The stories are too similar. And evolution or long age geology, it's not just that you have to prove that there was long ages. You have to explain why there's these other things going on that that do not fit the theory, right? They don't fit the data points. They don't match up. An example is the hadrosaur that Mary Schweitzer recently found, and the T-Rex she found, and the Triceratops that Mark Armitage found, all with soft tissue in them. Why do we have dinosaurs that supposedly have been here for 65 million years but then have soft tissue inside of them?
Can I respond now? Because
Absolutely.
otherwise I think I'll run out of time. Soft tissue in dinosaurs has been known about since the 1970s. We're not even sure. I mean, Mark Armitage hasn't really put his I know his paper was peer reviewed. He never dated the fossil though, or never published a date for it. People are actually not even sure that it's a Triceratops horn. There's been a lot of speculation it may be a bison horn. I've spoken with Mary Schweitzer myself. I did a Google Hangout like this with her over a year ago, and Mary's a Christian. And she's an evangelical Christian. She considers herself. She's just not a young Earth creationist, and she gets really upset when people kind of adopt her work and everything, because she spent 10 years. And I'm not angry with you, no, but she spent 10 years studying this, and she came up with the reason why the soft tissue was preserved. And soft tissue is a type of tissue. It doesn't mean it was soft and stretchy when it was found. Soft tissue is organic material, soft tissues from your body, but that have been preserved.
Yeah, but you can look at the microscope. She can see.
Yeah, it was soaked in acid to make it right, but it was soaked in acid to dissolve the minerals and prepare it to be able to do that. She also found that iron was a preservative, and there's been 4 other independent studies done that have come to the same conclusion since she published that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I've read the details.
We have a lot of
stuff
now on that.
Go ahead.
But also you talked a bit about again the Bible and the King's List and everything like that. I mean, there are stories like Moby Dick out there that have actual places in them and things, but we can't take the whole story as literal. We can learn things from it, but we can't take the entire thing as a literal historical.
I understand the perspective you're saying, but we can neither say none of it's true either. So we're kind of at a difficult position where we have to go, okay, well, we know some of it's true, but we don't know that all of it's true. But how much can we know that's true, and how does that affect, our perspective on reality? All of life is based on probabilities, right? So I wasn't there, you weren't there, so we have to draw a conclusion. I feel like I've taken up a lot of the time here. We're coming up on a break again, but I'm going to give you
one quick thing. Then can I just say one quick thing? Then you mentioned the flood stories. Not a single one matches Genesis. Not a single one. In fact, they talk about how similar they are, and most of the time it's water is almost the only similarity. Here's a good one, real short. Chameleon heard a strange noise like water running in a tree, but at that time there was no water in the world. He cut open the trunk, and water came out in a great flood that spread all over the earth. The first human couple emerged with the water. Now that's a pygmy, African pygmy flood myth. That's one of the stories creationists include in Flood Stories of the World. So, there's no way that someone could read that and, you know, say it's anywhere similar to the story we see in Genesis. I think Genesis. I think a lot of the reason we have flood stories is there were a lot of floods, but local and regional floods, not any kind of worldwide flood, because I don't believe there's any evidence for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're coming up on a break here. My guest is Bill Ludlow, and we're having a great discussion. I wish this discussion could go on for like 4 hours or something, but it can't. But stay with us. We've got one more segment left, and we'll continue to discuss this issue. Hey, thanks for being with us today. You're listening to Kevin Conover on Educate for Life. My website's educateforlife.org. And I hope you've been enjoying the show. I really have. I love talking to people who have different views than I do. I get bored talking to people that agree with me about everything. So I think it's kind of fun to talk to people who have different perspectives. And Bill Ludlow does. He has a great website you can check out if you'd like. It's creationsciencefiction.com. Make sure you counterbalance it though, with some other perspectives too. But it's great that we have the internet. We can hear all these different perspectives, from different people. So that's really cool. So Bill, we've been talking about the age of the earth and everything, and you wanted to ask me the question. Say that question again you mentioned off the air.
Okay, let me set it up a little bit first too. There's been studies out there by the Barna Group and others, and by Christian organizations that show that Christianity loses a lot of people by the time that they get to college and beyond, and pretty much the more educated you get, and I'm not saying Christians are uneducated, but the more educated they get, especially in the sciences, people tend to drop away. And one of the reasons they found out is that they felt that their upbringing was anti-science, especially young earth creationism. And so I believe that what you're doing in teaching young earth creationism is risking losing people altogether once they grow up and basically grow out of it. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I just think that, I'm not an anti-theist, I'm an atheist, but I see young earth creationism as slowly going away, the way of flat earth, the way of that thing. And I think you're just really risking losing the people that you're trying to reach by being so adamant that the earth is 6,000 years old.
Yeah. Well, personally, I love to have different perspectives. So I'm not about silencing dissent. So my perspective is, let's hear everybody's view. Let's evaluate what the truth is, and let's go towards the truth. But if I were to say, okay, I'm losing people, therefore I should stop teaching this, right? That's the ends justify the means. So meaning I'm going to do something that I think would be dishonest in order to achieve the goal of keeping people in the religion. And I think that's a red flag for any religion. Any religion that doesn't allow you to think freely and tries to hold you in, right? Jehovah's Witnesses do this. They used to not even let their people use the internet. Muslims do this. If you even question Allah, they silence you and tell you you're sinning. But as a Christian, I teach apologetics to young people, to students. I tell them, you're going to go out and you're going to talk to an atheist. You're going to go talk to an evolutionist. You're going to go talk to a Buddhist. You're going to go talk to a Muslim. And then we're going to have a discussion, and you're going to evaluate what the truth is. So personally, my personal philosophy, which I believe is a biblical philosophy, is that Jesus Christ said, when you seek me, you will find the truth, and the truth will set you free. So I believe that if you seek out truth, you'll end up at Jesus. If you seek out Jesus, you'll end up at truth. Now, that being said, I believe I'm an evidentialist. So I look at the evidence and I want to draw good conclusions. The reason that people are walking away, in my opinion, isn't because they're being taught young earth creationism. It's because they're not being taught the actual science behind the view that the earth is young. So I'm not allowed to talk about a view of God that presents young earth creationism in a public school. I'm literally not allowed to talk about it. Scientists, if you go to a school and you try to talk about intelligent design or the science behind radioisotope dating that supports young earth creationism, you are not allowed to talk about it. I was invited to go speak at a school, public school, on a job day, and they said, you can come. I said, I'm a Bible teacher. Can I still come? They said, you can come, you just can't talk about the Bible. And I understand that they don't want you indoctrinating kids. I understand that. But at the same time, there's a difference between indoctrination and actually presenting facts. And there are a lot of problems with evolutionary theory that I have seen, and I've talked to many people who agree with me on this. and those problems aren't typically allowed the opportunity to be presented. And I don't think it's a fair opportunity for people to be able to evaluate the truth. So I guess I would say that the reason people are leaving isn't because the science is lacking, but it's because either the science isn't taught well, or a straw man is put up, or it's essentially locked out of the classroom in school. I mean, I went to UCSD, and that's a very science-heavy school, and I had the opportunity to talk to lots of people, but of course, there's not going to be a perspective on creation in those classes. They just they couch it as religion, and so therefore you're silenced. You're told you can't talk about it.
Now, you teach in a Christian school, though.
I do,
Not
yeah.
a private school.
Yeah, but I was
And you do
invited to
teach young.
I was invited to a job fair at a public school, my school that I went to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you do currently teach young Earth creationism, basically, or I mean, in your apologetics classes, do you talk about the age of the Earth?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
Okay.
talk about the
And
age
I
of the
know in the online course that you presented, it's all geared around young Earth creationism
It is.
too. So,
I teach the other perspectives, but then I tell everybody my personal perspective is that there's more evidence for the young Earth position than any other position, and then I give them that. I teach them evolution too. I mean, I teach all about what evolution teaches, and I teach it accurately. I even used to bring in an evolutionist to my class on a regular basis to teach the class, to make sure I wasn't teaching something that wasn't true.
I would love to talk to you again about your human origins video, because I did watch that, and I'd love to talk to you about that in
Oh,
the
I'd love to
future.
talk about it. And
As far as, because yeah, I mean, I think you really kind of
anywhere I'm off, I'm happy to be corrected. And
yeah.
hey, you know, I'm not a perfect person, and I sure don't claim to have all knowledge. So I'm always open to somebody
Right.
saying, hey, did you know this, or did you know this, or did you know this? I mean, for me, that's how I learn. So I think that's
If
the way to be.
you haven't watched my debut with Kent Hovind yet, or no?
No, I
Have
want to
you
watch
ever?
that though. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, the 20 minutes at the beginning is an overview of what we currently teach on human evolution for the last, say, 3.5 to 4 million years. So it's a really good overview, and um, 95% of what was in that you don't mention in your section, when you talk about human evolution. So that's where I'm getting, is that by leaving out what we do teach and focusing on things that might have been taught 100 years ago, you're not actually giving a false perspective to the students on what's taught about evolution. That's
I'm
why,
really curious to know what it
you know,
is. Can you give me a quick example of like something that's currently being taught that is kind of new information that would be more supportive of the evolution, human origins issue?
well, the fact that we now know that it was not like a ladder like progression, we don't use that march of progress, ascent of man kind of image. I mean, that hasn't been used in a long, long time. It was really just featured in magazines and stuff. But we know now that at any given time there were different populations of hominins, human ancestors that had a lot of variability, different species even alive at the same time. It wasn't a ladder like progression from one to the next, but like say in your presentation you show this species, this species, this species. So again, it's just, I would say
So
95% of what
there's
we
not
currently
a
teach
ladder
on
like
is left
progression,
out.
but what is the progression then? If you've got a bunch of different hominid species all over the place,
Hmm.
what is the progression that you're referring to?
What we see over time is we see the change in populations, and we see, um, primitive features in the earlier ones. We see those features go away over time. We see more derived, or modern type features in the more recent ones, and we just see a gradual change. With uh, a very good example of change from ape to modern human between 2.2, say 1.7, 1.6 million years ago. What you would call a change in kind, we just call it change in species over time. But I mean, the evidence is all there, but I don't,
Yeah.
that's why I said that may be a whole other discussion
Yeah,
for us
absolutely.
in
You
the
know, I'd
future.
love to have you on another time, Bill, to get more into maybe more specifics on a particular subject. I'd find that very interesting. But
One last thing too,
yeah,
or one thing. I don't make any money off of this, but
sure.
a friend of mine who's a Christian, Ken Wolgamuth. In fact, I believe all the authors on this book were Christians, and it's called the Grand Canyon Monument to an Ancient Earth. Can Noah's Flood explain the Grand Canyon? And it basically talks about all the creationist arguments for the ancient, or for the young Earth, and the Grand Canyon, and refutes them one by one. Again, it's they even take care to explain. I got my autograph copy here with the authors, but they even take the time to explain that they're not knocking Christianity in here and why. Again, it's anti-young Earth creationism, but it is written by Christians for Christians. So
I understand that. Yeah.
A great book.
That's awesome.
So.
And I wanted to throw this out there to you too. If you know anybody, I mentioned Walt Brown. Do you know who Walt Brown is? The guy I mentioned.
I do. Yeah, he is in Phoenix here. He works out of his house here in Phoenix.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He has a. I don't know if you know about this, or maybe it's. He told me he has a standing offer to have a written debate with anybody with an earned degree in any science field.
Right.
And he'll pay them $10,000. It'll go into an escrow account. And he said they don't even have to win the debate. All they have to do is agree to do the debate and finish the debate, and they'll automatically get that $10,000. So I'm really, I would love to see that, because to me that'd be really interesting if you had two people from.
I don't remember what the terms of the debate are, but Kent Hovind used to have a $250,000, standing offer. I don't think he could afford that now, but he had that out there for years, and he, the terms of the debate were. Basically, he put together a straw man of what evolution was, and then you had to prove that. So I'm not exactly familiar with Walt Brown's offer, but
the cool thing about Walt Brown's offer is you don't have to win it. All you have to do is participate, which I think is
right.
Hey, that's a win-win, So
yeah,
I feel like that'd be pretty interesting. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there if you know anybody that's interested in that sort of a thing. But anyway, thanks for being on the program today. We're about out of time. I know it flies by, so.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
But I'll stay in touch with you, and if I was talking off air to Bill, for those of you listening, and maybe I'd love to debate you here in San Diego sometime. So if you're open to that, that'd be a fun thing.
I think it would be great, like a PowerPoint presentation type thing, or something where we could
up at
San Diego
State University, back and forth.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, I'd be really happy to do that. So.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, Bill. It's been great.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care. Okay, thanks for everybody listening out there. I hope you guys enjoyed the program here, and probably, if Bill's willing, probably have him on again sometime, because I thought it was great. So anyway, have a great day, and we'll be back next week. Take care.